back to Power Hour. Thank you for joining us, caring about your world. I was trying to get Field McConnell on the line. Let's see if we were able to reach him. He's at the airport right now. He's a former pilot. Do we have Field on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Hi, Field. Good morning to you. And thank you for letting us take advantage of your knowledge here. Just wanted to get your feelings and thoughts regarding this issue of the Russian plane crash. Have you formulated anything since the event took place on Saturday?
Well, it's the same pattern over and over. This is the 14th one of these, and I spend more time communicating with Russia than I do with the United States government because it has fallen on deaf ears, the sum total of what I've reported to the FAA. And I would suggest at this point that Michael Huerta, Huerta, the FAA administrator, would certainly have difficulty defending himself against charges of misprision of felony wrongful death in the 14 aircraft that have been blown out of the sky, consistent with my warning that I had in a civil case. And you may recall the civil case was filed in Washington, D.C. District Court in 2008, and it revealed the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot, which is not a question mark because it has been in every new Boeing since 1995. It has been in every new Airbus since 1989. And
okay, explain to the listeners, Field, explain to the listeners what the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot is. What is that to a person who's never heard of it?
Okay, it's a wonderful device that's supposed to prevent human hijacking. The way it would prevent the human hijacking, which is a noble cause, is that when triggered either by pilots, if they knew about it, which they don't, or by external sources such as the FAA or the Air Traffic Control System or the U.S. military, any fly-by-wire glass cockpit airliner can be remotely controlled, and the history on the patents goes back to 1953, and I have 66 pages of patents, and I've shared that with the U.S. government, but the United States government has been trying to ignore this issue, and that's why all of my efforts are outside the country. I traveled to Malaysia to explain it to Malaysia when Malaysia 370 went down. I went to Germany to stand up for Andreas Lubitz when he was
okay, all right. I know that you had your lawsuit, and I know that you are big on the uninterruptible autopilot. How does that relate to the Russian craft? Let's just talk about the Russian crash.
Sure. Did you notice that there was no radio call out of the Russian airplane on its way down?
Correct. In other words, there was no help, distress. No mayday, no nothing. Correct.
That's correct. And the very first thing that happens when the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot, and when I say Boeing, it's the same in Airbus, in Embraer, or Bombardier, or Sukhoi aircraft. The very first two things that occur when the Boeing or the whichever uninterruptible autopilot is triggered, the radios are turned off and the transponder is turned off. And so that's why in these incidences, which now total 14, there's no mayday call typically, and there's no emergency transponder code, which is 7700, because those devices are shut down. But anyway, I'm in an airport and it's sort of busy here, so I'll turn it over to you so you can ask me a question, and I'll try my best to answer it.
Okay, I was just wondering, do you think that this looks like that the plane either was shot down, that there was a SAM missile, something on board, or was there they just simply drove it into the ground?
No, it was one of two things. It was either shot down with a weapon that was very precise and hit the aircraft right in the middle because it came down in two big chunks. That's my understanding. Please correct me if you know better. Secondly, the most certain way to have an aircraft have an unconstrained failure of the fuselage would be to have a device on board the aircraft. And, you know, the people that are doing this, they're not unknown to us, and they're very sloppy, and they consistently use the same pattern, which makes it so easy for us to recognize it. They always give you something visual to look at to distract you. and then they use other weapons. The best example is 9/11. Everybody in the world watched tapes of United 175 or its drone replacement hitting the second tower. But that was just eye candy because the tower itself had pre-placed explosives, and there were at least 3 different ways of destroying the tower, and the aircraft were just used to increase the shock and awe value. And it's not working because maybe most people are confused by what they see, but as long as there's some of us that are not confused, we can hold the feet to the fire of the guilty parties. And I'm not suggesting that members of the United States government are doing this, but what I am telling you very clearly is members of the United States government are not doing what they should do, and that is exposing the devices which are involved in these crashes. There's been 14 of them now, Joyce.
Now, give the listeners a bit of a background. I appreciate you're doing this at the airport, which I can't imagine what they're thinking about your saying this, but tell me, just give the listeners a little bit of your background as to why you feel competent and are able to give an opinion on this.
Well, I grew up in an Air Force family, so I've been around airplanes since I was tall enough to walk. And my father spent 30 years as an Air Force pilot. So I grew up around Boeing jet bombers and jet tankers. I went to the Naval Academy at Annapolis. I graduated the same class as Chick Burlingame, who was murdered. That's the correct verb. He was murdered on 9/11. He was the captain of Flight 77 that did not hit the Pentagon.
Right. People might not remember who he was, so I'm glad you mentioned him.
Well, I'm tied to 9/11, not because I want to be, but my sister is involved in the evil side of 9/11. She and Hillary Clinton got a hold of a device called the QRS-11 gyro chip. And your listeners can just Google my name, and maybe you can give my name. I hate to do it because it sounds like I'm trying to draw attention to myself, which I'm not. But the QRS-11 gyro chip, if your listeners just Google QRS-11 plus BUAP, that's Boeing Uninterruptible Autopilot, plus ATI plus 9/11, you can see the devices that were used on 9/11 to destroy those 4 aircraft, and they're the same devices that have now destroyed 14 other aircraft in what I used to call the baker's dozen. That signifies 13, but now this is the 14th aircraft that may well be a victim of these devices. But back to my background, after I graduated from the Naval Academy, I flew for the United States Marine Corps. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I flew for the North Dakota Air National Guard, where my specialty was interception of manned or unmanned flying vehicles that do not belong in U.S. airspace. And so on the morning of 9/11, I was uniquely, I'm not the only guy in the world. There's plenty of us around. But I was in a position where I fully understood what was happening just from my eyeballs. I was trained and I flew intercept missions for 16 years, and the United States government trusted me to make quick decisions if something needed to be removed. And this is not rocket science, but the problem we're up against, Joyce, is that if these aircraft crashes are rationalized and understood, the fairy tale of 9/11 now unravels, and a whole lot of very important, they think they're important, I think they're elitist, I don't have a kind word for them, so I'll just keep my mouth shut, but the people that were on the planning side of 9/11 did a real sloppy job on 9/11, and increasingly each of these aircraft hits is also sloppy. Do you recall that I went to Malaysia after Malaysia 370 went to Diego Garcia?
Right, I remember that, yes.
Okay, well, when I went to Malaysia, this is something that can be Googled. I told them on the 29th of March of 2014 in writing that if they didn't expose the Boeing Uninterruptible Autopilot and the ATI, the Air Tranquilizing Ejector, they should expect to have another explosive event by the 17th of July of 2014. And strange as it may seem, it was exactly on the 17th of July of 2014 that Malaysia 17 went down over the Ukraine. And that was another one of these, what I used to call the baker's dozen. But now, sadly, because Russia has suffered the loss of this A321. I can no longer say Baker's dozen because there's 14. Did you happen to see the email I tried to send you, and I know a lady in Minnesota tried to send you, of a YouTube where 2 days before the crash, John McCain was suggesting that maybe some Russian airplanes should be shot down?
Oh, no, I did not see that. I'll look for that. Wow.
Yeah, I think you know, I'm not going to mention the lady's name, but there's a lady who's first...
Right, I know who you're talking about. I'll go back and see if I missed one of my emails. Thank you.
The YouTube. I sent it to you, but I'm no stranger to John McCain because he and I both went to the Naval Academy. He lies about that. He says he was bottom in his class. That's not true. He was seventh from the bottom. I filed treason charges against him, and your listeners can find that by just Googling John McCain plus treason plus my name, Field, Field McConnell, McConnell. And, you know, McCain, the name McCain is synonymous with treason. His father and grandfather both were involved in treason. In the case of his father, the issue was the USS Liberty, and I think you recall the USS Liberty, don't you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Our listeners know about that also.
Yeah. Well, you know, I challenged John McCain to meet me in a public place and have a moderator and let us talk, because I think that just based on the truth, I could chew him up and spit him out real quickly. And I'm not entertained by these serial murders where innocent people, whether they're Russian, Malaysians, Ukrainians, Rwandans, Vietnamese, Indonesians, you know, people are people. We're all creations of God, and man should not be killing man. You know, let us live our life. And I will not let these issues rest, Joyce. And I'm going to Dallas to work on something that you're going to like. I think you have a background in the military. And I'm going down right now today to look at a ranch that'll probably become a veterans retreat. And that's some positive news against all this negative news. But sometimes people say, well, if and this is them speaking, not me, but I have critics that say, well, if you think you're so smart and these airplanes are all drones, which, by the way, they are, how do you have the nerve to get on one? And the reason I have the nerve to get on airplanes, and I do, I've been to England 5 times, Germany once this year, there are defenses against these mechanisms, but they can only be triggered by people who know what they are. And the United States of America government should take a leadership position in exposing these autopilots. Some of the other airlines in the world have already exposed them and expunged them, and those nations include Germany and Israel, and I believe the UAE, and I can't pronounce Qatar, Qatar, I think it's pronounced Qatar, but the certain airlines now have realized that the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot, even though it was meant to be a very good safety feature, has been used for exactly the opposite, and now there's 14 airplanes that have been destroyed bearing the signature of the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot.
Now, how many years were you a pilot, commercial pilot?
I was I'll start with the military pilot. I was a military pilot for 22 years. I was a airline pilot for 31 years. 29 years I was at Delta, and I retired as a 747-400 captain in 2007 because the United States Department of Justice did not appreciate my thorough understanding of what happened on 9/11. And it was my good fortune to be recruited by a Muslim airline. I went over, in fact, I'm wearing, this is interesting, I'm in an airport and I'm wearing a Kazakhstan ID. I went to Kazakhstan for 18 months in 08, 09, and I flew with Muslims, and they knew I was a Christian, and none of them killed me, and we didn't hit any tall buildings. And for your listeners, if they think I'm being flippant, they simply don't understand that Astana, Kazakhstan is the Dubai of the North, and it is absolutely running amok with tall buildings. And when I say the Muslims that I flew with didn't fly me any buildings, I say that because I'm trying to ridicule the major media in the United States of America that is still selling the Shaggy Dog story that Muslims attacked America on 9/11. They certainly did not. They could not. And, you know, this will come to if we don't get into World War III, which, of course, the people that did 9/11 need to get into World War III to cover their tracks, but these issues, I think, will be resolved by outside influence. I mean, outside the United States. Russia certainly has a horse in this race, and I've communicated directly with KGB, which is also called GRU, this morning. I didn't have a firm appointment, but I did have a opportunity to be in the audience of Vladimir Putin on the 19th of December. And who knows, maybe if he is really concerned with this crash, maybe I'll go over there yet. I'm certainly not intimidated by the United States government. And
I know you're not, and I've got to go, but I want to thank you very much for joining us. I know you're at an airport ready to leave, but thank you so much, Field, for giving us your feedback.
I'll follow up by email.
Please do. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Let us know anything that's going on. Yes, God bless you too, and have a safe trip. We want to know what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. We want to know, and that's what I appreciate all of our listeners out there. And thank you to Field McConnell again. And to Teresa, thank you very much for helping us out on that one.